Fans of survival games are dying for something new, and while the year has been a bit rough for the genre, things are definitely starting to pick up. Hey there friends, it's Codiak here, welcome back to Legacy Gaming. Today, we're diving in to check out Stunlock Studios' brand new online action survival game, VRising, to find out if it's worth your time. Before we jump in, I want to make something abundantly clear. Livid and I have spent the last week, day in and day out, playing VRising. Alongside our friends Solaros and Kronos, we've all been putting in some serious work, reaching the end portions of the game, so we can give you an honest and full account of our experiences. We're noticing a lot of slapped-together reviews from content creators just now discovering the game, so we wanted to level set so you knew exactly the efforts we went into to put this video together. For those that don't know, VRising is a top-down, always-online action survival game created by Stunlock Studios, the team behind Battlerite. The entire experience is vampire-themed, which is the first real change to the survival formula, and I think it's worth pointing out right away because the team really leans into the theme, and that's a good thing. No matter what you're doing, harvesting resources, pillaging towns, or going toe-to-toe in some PvP, the theme is omnipresent and helps ground the entire game. During our time with VRising in the last beta period ahead of launch, it was clear we were playing something familiar, yet entirely fresh, and that's the real secret sauce that a lot of developers trying to tackle a survival game have just failed to do. Capitalize on the things that work, strip away the things that don't, and innovate where they can. I'm happy to report that both Livid and I think Stunlock Studios absolutely nailed the execution, and even though May 17th, 2022 is just the early access release, we can say with full confidence VRising is definitely worth your time. Now, if you've followed the channel for any stretch of time, you might be saying to yourself, Codiak, what gives? Usually you save that review score until the end. And you know what? Forget that. VRising is a damn fun game, and you all need to know that right from the start. But to truly appreciate what Stunlock has created, we need to drill down. The core gameplay experience is pretty much what you'd expect for a survival game. You start with practically nothing and have to find your way within the world, smacking trees, busting apart rocks, and crafting some basic gear. But that experience lasts all of, 30 minutes before the game really starts to go off on its own path. It all really becomes apparent during your first day in Vardoran, the fictional world our adventures take place in. With the sun high above, we have to contend with our first unique system, sunlight. If you're not familiar with vampire mythos, sun equals bad, and in VRising, sun can also equal dead. While it's daytime, you'll have to contend with another layer of the VRising experience, using shadows as cover to avoid prolonged exposure to the sun. Stay out in the open for too long and you'll begin to burn, taking some serious damage every second. This system is so well tuned, it's frustrating, and while I want to hate it with every fiber of my being, I can't because it's just so smart. What's really great about this system is it breaks up the rhythm of just running around the world. As the day progresses, the shadows move, so the experience of using cover and finding safe spaces to hide and maneuver is dynamic. The sun inevitably changes the cadence of players' movement, and this is an interesting thing, especially in group play. Someone like me would rather just hide in the castle for a few minutes, organize some boxes, and work on progression there, while someone like Livid, a bit more adventurous, would risk the exposure to stay out in the world. A day-night cycle isn't a new thing, but the way the system is positioned in VRising feels truly unique and to some degree innovative. But again, it all ties back to the theme. Whether you choose to hide in the shadows or just wait until nighttime, you'll begin your adventure in VRising, gathering resources and starting your progression journey. VRising doesn't feature a traditional experience system, which means your entire progression as a player is tied to something else, your gear and powers. This is where Stunlock throws another new system into the mix, blood. At its most basic level, blood is the thirst of VRising. It's a system that you need to maintain by killing and feeding on enemies within the world. As long as your blood remains above 0, you're good to go and won't take any ticking damage. However, blood gets a bit more interesting when you consider that every target in the game is broken down into one of 6 categories: creature, brute, warrior, rogue, scholar, or worker. Depending on what type of target you feed on will grant you a different set of buffs. It's a really fascinating system that you can either lean into to great effect or virtually ignore. The best players will scour the world looking for high percentage targets that activate more buffs of a specific type, while more casual players might just feed on any target just so they don't die. What I really want to talk about in regards to blood though is V-Blood units. These are the main vehicle to progression within the game, and at the time of launch there are 37 in total. Each V-Blood unit, and I do mean each and every one, is a unique mini-boss style encounter that will challenge even the best players. There are some truly awesome fights that not only feel challenging, but are equally rewarding. Once killed, you'll be able to feast on a V-Blood unit, absorbing their knowledge and unlocking all sorts of interesting things. Some V-Blood units will unlock a new crafting station, others powerful new spells, but with each kill, you gain one step closer to Vampiric Ascension. For our crew of 4 that played in the beta, this was really when the PvE side of the game was at its best. For the most part, these were brilliantly designed fights that struck the right balance in terms of challenge, while also still managing to be completely unique from one another. No two fights are really the same, and with each kill, you truly feel like you're gaining power, and that, my friends, is the mark of a good system. To be fair, what really makes V-Blood fights stand out is the combat system within the game. If you've played Battlerite, you already know the team's style, but it's clear they lean hard into their experience with that game, and it shows. As Livid said during one of our chats during the beta, Stunlock understands action combat to levels of near perfection. Movement is intuitive and fluid, actions feel impactful, and the customization allowed for in VRising gives players so many options for how they want to play the game. It's not an overly deep system, but it's flexible, and that's really the key to the combat system within the game. Your weapons have a basic attack as well as potentially 2 skills. These will vary based on the type of weapon and the tier. For example, a copper weapon will only have 1 skill, whereas an iron weapon or above will have 2. Both of these skills, paired with your powers, 2 standard and 1 ultimate, make for a toolkit of moves that creates for some really unique loadouts. The more V-Blood units you kill, the more powers you have access to, and once again, the team really leans into the theme, presenting players with powers in Blood, Unholy, Illusion, Chaos, and Frost Magic. What's even better are the relatively low cooldowns on practically everything, meaning there's always something you can leverage during a fight. So to recap, you've got a fluid movement system with intuitive WASD controls, a variety of weapons like swords, maces, slashers, and more that can swap on the fly, each with their own unique abilities, and a smattering of offensive and defensive powers that are not only flashy, but functional as well. Bottom line, the combat is superb, and the system flexibility the team has built into the game not only lends itself to some truly awesome V-Blood fights, but the freedom to expand and build upon this in the future. Combat as a whole is fantastic, but where the system really shines is in PvP, and yes, I know this isn't for everyone. Enemy AI in the game is pretty good, don't get me wrong, and while some lesser minions do feel like punching bags that don't know their ass from their elbow, overall the AI manages to exceed my expectations. However, combat truly takes on a different form in PvP, and here again we have to remember the company's roots: Battlerite and arena-style small team combat. If you thrive in high-stakes, quick confrontations where a split-second reaction could mean the difference between life and death, you will absolutely love VRising's PvP combat. The only real catch here is the absolutely absurd durability cost that comes from dying to another player. It's something like 45% per item, a number way too high, which almost deterred us from engaging in PvP during our time with the game, simply because the cost to repair our items, specifically at the end game, were far too expensive. If the team can iron out that issue, the rest already falls into place and will provide countless hours of heart-pumping action. As I said during the intro, VRising is a true survival game, and it'd be a pretty terrible review if we didn't discuss that system in some detail. As I said in our ultimate preview video, you're not building bungalows and shacks. You're a vampire, and a vampire needs a castle. Things do start off pretty simple, with some wooden walls and basic stations, but within the first hour, you're constructing castle walls and pumping blood essence into your heart, allowing crafting stations to autonomously churn out resources and provide the essential materials needed to progress. VRising's building isn't freeform, which means you are locked to a grid, but that doesn't mean it's not interesting. In fact, the theme, there's that word again, really helps the building feel unique. At the center of your castle is the castle heart, which you need to keep stocked with blood essence at all times. This isn't hard, and trust me when I say you will have thousands of blood essence at all times, but it's a smart system that matters in a persistent world. When the castle heart is empty, the castle itself begins to decay, and that means it's vulnerable to attack. This is an important system within the world, because as players come and go, the devs need a way to remove castles from within the world, and decay is an easy way to go about doing that. Vardoran is only so big, and while the map feels large, it fills up quick, even with the official server cap of just 40 players. With your castle heart placed, you can really start to create your own unique castle within the world, and here again, there are some interesting stations that really just make the game feel different. Things like the grave station allow you to summon skeletons that you can then kill for bones, one of the most essential early game resources. Other stations like the grinder and sawmill are a bit more familiar, but when you weave in something old with something new, you create something entirely different, and that's what makes the building feel unique. There are also a whole ton of cosmetic aspects to building, and while we really didn't lean into them during the beta, because we're sweaty tryhards, it's clear the team isn't forgetting the thousands of players that play survival games to simply create something beautiful. Just like the combat, building feels great. It's intuitive, easy to understand, and while the interface can get a bit frustrating as you toggle between tabs trying to find something like a chest or floor tile, it's a small hiccup in an otherwise polished system. In the same vein, the resource refinement and crafting scratches that oh-so-familiar itch that players crave in these types of games. As a squad of 4, the max clan size within the game, we found that there was always something to do, some resource we needed to refine or transmute to push the entire team forward. What's so brilliant about all of this, and the team has gone so far as to address it ahead of launch, is the way materials continue to matter, no matter the tier, and that seamless nature that makes them roll into one another. Early game resources feed directly into mid game resources, which feed directly into end game resources, and there's very little going backwards to get what you need, but always a way to find some use for things in previous tiers. The only real hiccup here are some of the drop rates for certain resources. In most cases, there is V-Blood units that, once killed, give you a secondary way to get that resource, but in some cases, farming for that item and the alternate way of getting that item don't line up, and that can be a bit of a pain point. That being said, your base will constantly be buzzing with stations pumping out resources, all leading you to the crafting and new sets of gear, and thus a higher power level. To its benefit, none of this is overly complicated. At most, you'll need 3 items to make another item, and that's just the right amount of complexity for a game that features a fair number of refinement and crafting stations. Where I think the game makes a slight misstep is the actual diversity of some of the craftable gear, specifically surrounding the armor. There just isn't the same level of flexibility with the armor that's present with the weapons, and while the accessory item, rings, and amulets provide some loadout diversity, I wish there was a bit more when it comes to the actual armor. This could very well be ironed out during early access, but as of right now, armor progression is very linear and doesn't really break out of that box. Again, it's a small issue and really only noticeable on paper, if you will, but something I wanted to mention. To round out this review, we need to talk about Vardoran itself and the care and love put into every corner of the world. I truly think the age of procedural generation and copy-paste landscapes are over, and if there's one lesson I took away from one of 2022's biggest games, Elden Ring, it's that a handcrafted world done right is easily one of the most impactful things to a player experience. Stunlock Studios managed to achieve this in VRising, maybe not to the level of Elden Ring, but well enough that it's noticeable. Broken into multiple zones, each area of the world feels unique while still remaining true to the theme. Farbane Woods, the Dunley Farmlands, the Cursed Forest, and Silverlight Hills each have their own characteristics that set them apart from one another, but all connected in a way that makes the world feel like one. Part of the magic to the world is the ways in which Stunlock makes players move around it. The entire world is connected by a series of roads that the AI actively use to move about the world. Because of the day-night cycle, it's not always possible to use those roads, which means you'll often have to traipse through the woods just to avoid the sunlight. Players can also take advantage of teleporters and secret passageways, or turn into wolves for some added speed. When all else fails, you can steal a horse and ride back to your castle. You see, there are a number of ways to get around without the unlimited freedom to just open a map and jump wherever you want. Certain parameters, like not being able to use a teleporter when carrying resources, may seem frustrating, but that's by design. It cleverly increases the chance of player interaction, and in most cases, especially on PvP servers, this makes for a better experience. Things get a little wild as you progress towards the endgame and unlock other means of moving around the world, but ultimately the restrictions help. Traveling across Vardoran is only made better by the landmarks and locations themselves that you'll visit while out on your adventures. On the road, you'll run across small groups of enemies, but in the encampments and fortifications, you'll really experience the world come to life. Jam-packed with enemies and often V-Blood units, each location is a handcrafted experience that rarely feels the same. Sure, small bandit camps will have some similarities, but I'm talking about the big set pieces, the ones that are meant to look and feel different, and they've accomplished this goal. You have to remember too that VRising is just entering into early access, which means the world can and absolutely will expand. And while a new biome in some games might not feel like a big deal, because the world is intimately linked to the resources, V-Blood units, and ultimately progression, it gives the developers an almost surefire way to draw players back in as more content gets added. What Stunlock Studios manages to accomplish with VRising is pretty simple to break down. It's a polished early access survival game that takes well-established systems from other games, makes them accessible and easy to understand, while also injecting in fresh ideas to make the game feel unique. It sounds simple enough, but the team has done a masterful job presenting players with something that could truly disrupt the year and become a smash hit. The gaming world is primed for another cult hit, a smaller game that catches fire, much the way Among Us did a few years back. VRising has all the makings of a successful game, and with streamers and content creators starting to pick up on the game, I have no doubt the masses will come to understand and realize what Livid and I have, that VRising is absolutely worth your time. VRising is available in early access right now, and with most EA titles, it starts out relatively cheap at just $20, but will no doubt creep up as development continues. The game is in great shape, and after about 50 hours with the game, we can confidently say this is one you'll absolutely want to pick up if it even slightly piqued your interest. If you did find this worth your time review helpful, do me a solid and hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. There are so many big games coming out in 2022, and if you're looking for a new take on some of the year's biggest titles, we've got you covered. We also invite you to join us on Discord. We've got a great group of around 20,000 with a special section dedicated just for VRising, including our very own community server. So if you're interested in that, check out the link in the description below. Finally, if you like everything we're doing here at Legacy Gaming and you want to support us even more, you can do so by becoming a member. For just a couple bucks, you're helping evolve the channel and take our community to that next level. Check out the join button below to learn more. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.